message that they both love. I'd like to welcome to the stage, I'm so excited for this, Evelyn Yang.
Thank you so much for braving the cold to be out here today. I am so honored to be here with you all, roaring for justice, roaring for equality, roaring for peace, and roaring for change. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Evelyn Yang. And as Susan mentioned, as a professional marketer turned stay-at-home mom. I have two wonderful little boys at home, one of whom is autistic. And I've lived in New York my entire life, but I never imagined that I would be here today in this context with my husband, Andrew Yang, running for president. I have to admit that when he first told me he was running, I thought it might just be a phase. Like so many of us, he was very unhappy with the outcome of the last presidential election. And he was searching for answers. When I realized what his motivation was and what he was set out to accomplish, that's when I gave him my blessing. Andrew is fighting for big structural change, putting power back into people's hands. His message is humanity first, and his signature proposal is the freedom dividend, $1,000 a month for every American adult. It's otherwise known as a basic income. It's what Martin Luther King was fighting for when he was assassinated. And it is such an important idea that this is one of the main reasons why I let Andrew run for president. Thank you.
That's right.
1/3 of Americans are living in poverty. 70% of them are women and children. I'm talking about hunger and homelessness in New York and in the United States of America. We have all become way too comfortable with this reality.
Yes, we have.
And we are one of the richest nations in the history of the world. None of us should be okay with this.
No,
we have the means to eradicate poverty. And I believe, cheer for eradicating poverty. We have the means to eradicate poverty, and I believe that we have a moral obligation to do so. Poverty is racist. Poverty is sexist. Poverty preys on the LGBTQ community. A basic income is the most direct way to end poverty. Women in our society have an extra burden. We are overwhelmingly the mothers and the caregivers. We regularly sacrifice our time, our dreams, our financial independence in the service of our families. The freedom dividend would immediately recognize the uncompensated work that caregivers do every day, as well as recognize the uncompensated but important work of so many other people, such as the work of mentors and coaches and organizers and activists.
That's right.
Even artists and creatives.
Woo!
And let's not forget the women who are trapped in abusive situations.
Yes.
Of course, $1,000 a month would not solve all of their problems, but it would be transformative. It would mean that they could walk away with an income, with a reliable source of income to start.
Yes, it does.
We have an obligation to look after the most vulnerable and the most marginalized in our community. The freedom dividend would be a safety net, a lifeline for anyone falling on hard times, because we all know that poverty is a slippery slope. Sometimes I get to read the letters that Andrew gets from supporters on the campaign trail. Most of them happen to be from women. One woman's story in particular resonated with me. She's an entrepreneur, and she said that after she heard Andrew talking about how women entrepreneurs need more resources and more support, she had the courage to step forward and press charges against an investor who had sexually assaulted her. Her courage helped encourage mine. Now, you might have heard that I'm standing here today also as a survivor of sexual assault. There are far too many of us. Perpetrated by my OBGYN when I was 7 months pregnant with our first child. I never returned to see him again, but I lived with shame and regret. I later discovered that he had assaulted dozens of women over a period of decades at a university hospital that enabled his abuse. And then that university used all of their institutional influence and power to set up a plea bargain of the century. There was no jail time, barely a registered sex offender. The victims in this case were thrown under a bus. We had no visibility as to the deal making, no real explanation, and no justice. I wish I could say this was an isolated case.
No, it's not.
A freak example of injustice. But unfortunately, it is not. Far too many women in our society are harmed and hurt, and then betrayed, and betrayed again by the institutions that are meant to protect us. I'm telling you what you probably already know. But what happened to me was business as usual. As we learned with the Weinstein and the Epstein cases, this is nothing new. This is happening right now, underneath our noses. Every day. It is the abuse of power and privilege. Counting on women to feel helpless and stay silent, because if they speak up, who will listen? Who will believe them? And what will even change? Because the victims are poor women, or women of color, or just normal women who don't have Hollywood behind them, for example. That was me, a normal, anonymous woman. But in my case, what no one saw coming was that this Jane Doe's husband would eventually run for the President of the United States and become a national political figure with hundreds and thousands of supporters. Thank you, Yang Gang.
Yang Gang!
And that suddenly this Jane Doe would have a national platform. It is a great, great privilege to have a public voice. And I didn't want to waste it. So you see, for me, the theme of this march, to rise and to roar, it's very personal. As terrifying as it was to share my story on a national stage, I had to believe that coming forward would help me reclaim my voice and help others reclaim theirs. Otherwise, we would all just be another statistic